comic book series Unfamiliar has 2 volumes out that you can buy right now, so check the link in the description if you're interested. Okay, thank you, bye. Hey everybody, it's LavenderTowne. And today I'm going to be continuing my series where I go on r/menwritingwomen and literally draw the Lovecraftian descriptions of women from there. She had a tall body. Her legs were more than 60% of her total height. She looked heroic and agile. Right now, her eyebrows were sharp like swords. Her eyes were shining like stars. She looked upwards. So this is a short passage, and it's not as crazy as a lot of the ones we're about to get to, but the problem here is that we've gotten very mathematical about it, and this is something that I can obviously actually check. So I'm going to make a line with 10 dashes on it, and we are going to have to make sure that her head, the top of her head remains at 10, and that her legs don't stop until we get above the 6 dash, and you quickly see that this becomes very scary very quickly. I also, of course, am going to abuse the usage of metaphor and make it literal because that's kind of the conceit of this entire video. And as I usually do, I do want to give a disclaimer. This is all meant in good fun and is mostly just a silly art challenge. This isn't meant to be a damning indictment of any of the writers in here or anyone who likes them. I know that's probably so obvious, but I do have to say it every once in a while just so that people know this is not like a hater style video. So once I established her rough proportions, I used this as a reference and tried a couple different poses because honestly it's hard to fit that much leg on the character and also make sure that like her face is clearly visible. She's actually like too tall. It really does remind me of that like song that's like they tried to put me on the cover of Vogue but my legs were too long. Like this is actually like her legs are actually too long. Like she can't be on the cover of Vogue anymore. So I tried a couple different positions. The first one I had in mind was kind of pin-up-y. It was really cute and I think it conveyed how long her legs were really well, with her hands kind of supporting her upper body on her knees. But again, I thought it was a little too pin-up-y and this character was described as looking heroic and agile, so I want to respect that. I decided to have her kind of flexing her arms, but then it just looked too weird. So I tried another position where she's sort of leaning back and we kind of see her legs kind of pinned up and we see how far her knees go above her head. That's another good way to show the wild proportions. But again, that didn't really convey like her energy that I think I'm getting from this very short paragraph. So I tried one more thing. I wanted her more in like a bodybuilder pose to make her look a little more actiony and heroic and athletic. So I had her kind of propping her bicep up on her insanely long leg and have her hand on her hip, and I was making her make kind of a crazier expression with those sword eyebrows. I am of course going to make them literally swords, like you had to expect that. And for me, I draw characters with stars in their eyes all the time anyway, so that wasn't even a stretch for me. I ended up actually going back to my original pose, but I changed it up a little bit. I ended up having just one arm up, and that I think works the best. I still think she looks kind of like babyish. I kept wanting to push her in more of a chibi direction because when you're making the proportions more and more crazy, it's very tempting to make them more and more cartoony because that actually like supports the wild proportion. The more realistic they look, the scarier those like stylization measures are. And I know that's the whole point of this video, but I was actually getting kind of freaked out and I just wanted her to look more and more cartoony. I still think she looks really, really scary. Like there's something about looking at her torso versus like the length of her femur that's actually like kind of unsettling. And yeah, I still think she's cute. I mean, there are definitely some dolls that have these proportions and it works really well, but I think the critical thing is that their heads have to be really big in comparison to their bodies. Again, once you get more and more realistic with the proportions, the more it starts to look really, really wrong and kind of cryptidy. I didn't really get anything about like her hair color or her outfit. I ended up just putting her in like gym clothes because I thought that would be a good way to show off her really long legs, as well as I feel like the only thing we know about her is that she looks kind of agile, and everything about her description makes her sound like she's kind of an athlete or some kind of like warrior type. But with only this to go on, I had to use a lot of creative liberties and try to figure out really who she is. I saw her across the room through the smoky fog of the party, like a dream of a promise that all the plastic people gyrating and posing around me could all just fade away into the air like the empty words that they spewed. Blonde hair, blue eyes, blonde hair, blue eyes, blonde hair, blue eyes, and fake tits, further than my eyes could bear. Until her. She was a brunette, and her realness wasn't trite or dull in a city like this. And then her eyes. Shimmering jade, shimmering jade, eyes like primeval pools, and I wanted to dive into their murky depths. They were snake eyes, but not like the eyes of a snake. Snake eyes like pools teeming with green serpents. There was a slippery darkness in her, I could tell, all from across the room. So this one is not too crazy. It's a pretty short paragraph, so mostly what we're working with is the fact that she's brunette, she's real, and of course this absolutely wild description of her eyes. The slippery darkness inside of her was something that I definitely wanted to try to include, even though that's clearly supposed to be very metaphorical and something inside of her. But everything about this just has like a very like Jughead Jones, like I'm not normal and I don't want to be normal kind of vibe, like especially this this assertion that he knows that she's real because her hair is brunette instead of blonde. As a natural blonde myself, I think that's always kind of annoying. I get that he's probably trying to say that all the people around her have dyed their hair blonde and she's the only one with her natural hair color, but I think it is really funny, this like idea that brunettes are inherently more intellectual or less shallow than a blonde person. So her primordial pools, as he calls them, they're very green. We get that much. I also love that he says she has like snake eyes, but like not like a snake's eyes, like a pool full of snakes. Like there's something very like kind of insecure about the way that this is written. It makes it sound like the writer's like second guessing how you're interpreting what he's saying, which is really funny. Not really the vibe you want to give off unless that's your specific narrator, and it might be. You know, we're not trying to roast anybody here, but this particular passage is very funny. I wanted to show a little snake peeking out of her eye because we really want to clarify that this is not green eyes like a snake's eyes. This is green eyes like snakes are in her eyes, so I must oblige. And of course, like I always do, when someone calls out a color specifically by an object or something like that, I will color drop it directly. Here is a piece of jade, and we're going to use that jade color in various different places. I also want to make sure that the way that I shade her eye later actually looks like deep, like pools. He talks about wanting to swim in them, so they have to have that like darkness in the center so that they feel like they have depth. And other than that, we don't really get anything about her. Her slippery darkness I kind of had as a pool in the background, and I made sure to put a little like danger, like slippery floor thing on her aura of darkness that he's able to see across the room, just so that everyone knows, like, be careful, you know, this is slippery darkness. It's not like your garden variety darkness. If your shoes are kind of worn down or, you know, they don't have good tread on them, like, you want to be careful around this darkness because you could lose your footing. So I made sure to really emphasize that. Other than that, she's just our usual very real brunette. I put some nice hard highlights on her in a couple places so she looks sort of like glossy and luminous. I played around with the snakes in her eyes and tried to make it look both like a pool and like snakes, which I think I managed with varying levels of success, but altogether this is how she ended up looking. I tried to put her in sort of like a party dress that's also green. I didn't want her to look too fake, since that seems to be an issue for the narrator, so I tried to otherwise make her look not too glammed up, just a girl with big old giant snake eyes, and not snake eyes, guys, snake pit eyes that are pits of snakes. Alright, buckle up. This one is long. Maggie. Long legs, trim and coltish, hips a trifle large, the kind that promote that specific thought in men, about getting their hands around them, belly flat, isometrics, waist cut to the bone, a waist that works in any style, from a dirndl to disco slacks, no breasts, all nipple but no breasts, like an expensive the way O'Hara pinned it. And no padding. Forget the cans, baby. There's other, more important actions. Smooth Michelangelo sculpted neck, a pillar proud, and all that face. Outthrust chin, perhaps a tot too much belligerence, but if you'd walloped as many gropers, you too, sweetheart. Narrow mouth, petulant lower lip, nice to chew on. A lower lip as though filled with honey? Bursting, ready for things to happen. A nose that threw the right sort of shadow, flaring nostrils, the acceptable words. Aquiline, patrician, classic, all of that. Cheekbones as stark and promontory as a spit of land after 10 years of open ocean. Cheekbones holding darkness, like narrow shadows, sooty beneath the taut-fleshed bone structure. Amazing cheekbones, the whole face, really. An ancient kingdom's up-tilted eyes, the touch of the Cherokee. The eyes that looked out at you as you looked into them, like someone peering out of the keyhole as you peered in. Actually, dirty eyes. They said, you can get it. Blonde hair, a great deal of it, wound and rolled and smoothed and flowing, in the old style, the page boy thing men always admire. No tight little cap of slipped plastic, no ratted and teased Annapurna of bizarre coiffure. No iron flat discotheque hair like the number 3 flat noodles. Hair the way a man wants it, so he can dig his hands in at the base of the neck and pull all that face very close. An operable woman, a working mechanism, a rigged and sudden machinery of softness and motivation. Okay, this keeps going on, like, for a lot longer, so I'm gonna cut it off here. But he does call her Pretty Maggie Money Eyes later on, so that's something that's gonna come into play later, but anyway. And I can see why this ended up on the Reddit. Not only is it incredibly long and kind of bizarre way to describe the physicality of our female character, it's very, very physical, it's very sexual, it's very stereotypical in that way. Other than that, she's flat-chested. It's a lot about how she's got big hips and a tiny little waist that looks good in all clothing. I did specifically want to note her Michelangelo type neck. Michelangelo was kind of famously into total, like, brick houses of men, like just the bulkiest, most muscular boys you can ever see. You especially see that in his paintings, and that's usually what I'm thinking of. So I did realize, looking at some of his Pietras and stuff, that he doesn't actually always sculpt quite such insanely ripped necks, but I couldn't lose this image. So she has a really, really strong neck. Like, she looks like if she was playing soccer, she could do a header like miles away. So that's just kind of what we're working with. Her waist is ultra small. Her hips are a little large, which of course he describes as making men think a certain thing. This was my other big pet peeve about this particular paragraph. And again, it's possible that within the context of the story and with the narrator, this might make perfect sense, but I am always a little thrown off when a female character is introduced mainly by the things that men think when they look at her, what men prefer. The line about her page boy hair being good for like grabbing the back of and that sort of thing just felt, it did ick me out a little bit, I have to confess. What icked me out even more though was the description of her lower lip being like burstingly huge as though filled with honey. This was disturbing because honey is not it's not the color that I typically associate with somebody's lips, and so I kept picturing this sort of like popping boba-esque, like honey filled bottom lip, and just the bottom lip as well. Again, he says it's nice to chew on, so he's looking at her and imagining the things he wants to do to her. It's not really like a super like humanizing kind of way to describe your female character. It's very, very much like objectifying her. And he calls her Maggie Money Eyes, so I did draw little dollar signs in her eyes. I looked up kind of the gist of this short story, and she is like a gold digger in this story. So yeah, that kind of goes along with this whole idea that beautiful women are like out for men's money, and that she's a bit too belligerent because she's been harassed so much, and I don't know. There's a lot to like snag on in this paragraph. I personally think it was probably my least favorite in the video. It's interestingly written. Like it is very intense, like the way it's described. Her cheekbones being described as like land that's been sort of worn away by the edge of like the ocean. It does sound extremely sharp and harsh, and that's an unusual way to describe a cheekbone, so I appreciated that. This also has another one of my least favorite things that you sometimes see on r/menwritingwomen, which is this description of her being like a touch of Cherokee. Just enough, just her eyes are slightly tilted upwards, or her cheekbones are nice, but like she's still blonde and blue-eyed. It just feels kind of like cowardly to me. I don't know. It's this whole idea of like this little touch of being like exotic somehow, but still looking extremely white. It's kind of a pet peeve of mine. So I don't know if that bothers anybody else, but it does kind of annoy me. We also had something like this when we were talking about a character's skin tone in a previous r/menwritingwomen video, and they described it as a drop of coffee in a cup of milk. It's the same kind of thing. Like we're afraid to get any more than a drop. And I think, you know, at that point, like, why even bring it up? Like, what are we doing here? I think she ended up looking way scarier, partially because of her extremely thick neck and her tiny waist. I think her page boy haircut is just looking gnarly, and the sooty slash of shadow underneath her cheekbone looks kind of horrifying. I also think that bottom lip is gonna haunt my nightmares, and the idea of honey floating around in there is kind of making me sick to my stomach, so let's move on. In the burning flames, blazing heaven demoness's immortal zombie body started to change. First, her 5-meter tall zombie body shrunk rapidly, returning to a normal person's height. Next, her skin, which was rough and dark like tree bark, vanished in the flames. White and tender skin appeared on her, like a freshly peeled egg. Next, her immortal zombie hair, which looked like messy red wheat stalks, turned long and slim. The red color was vibrant and warm. Finally, blazing heaven demoness's entire figure went through a complete transformation. From a scary giant zombie, she turned into a beautiful woman, wearing a red dress. She had tender skin, sharp features, her gaze was energetic, and her lips were bright red. Her chest was busty, it could barely be contained. Her legs were slim and long, yet they were also not thin. Most strikingly, her hair extended to waist length. It was burning red, giving off a dreamlike feeling, vibrant and overflowing with colors. Okay, so this book was translated, and it was actually originally a web novel, so I don't want to be too mean about the writing, but it does seem a little bit messed up. The way that this translation, at least particularly, is written, it doesn't sound right. The way that the character's description like returns back to itself, like they describe her hair changing and transforming into this long red hair, and then they bring it up like one passage down again as if this is the first time we're hearing this information, but they just add in that it's extended to her waist, and then they say it's vibrant and overflowing with colors, plural, which makes me wonder, like, is it multiple colors of red, or what are we talking about here? The best thing, and the reason I think that it ended up on r/menwritingwomen, is that her skin is described as looking like a freshly peeled egg. I honestly love this so much. Like, yes, it is funny. It's not like appealing in probably the way it's supposed to be. And again, this might be translation issues. Like, I don't think it's totally fair to judge this as harshly as something that's natively written in English, because we don't know what kind of nuance has been lost in the translation. We talked about that actually in the last episode of this series, but man, the way that it is now, this is just like a hilarious passage. I can perfectly picture it, like very shiny, very white, kind of wet looking skin, which I guess makes sense if she's sloughing off some sort of tree bark zombie skin that was over top of it. The blazing heaven demoness is also, it's kind of a gnarly name. It doesn't really roll off the tongue, but we're not here to criticize that. I love that it specifies that her body shrunk from 5 meters to normal. That's a really funny description, because it's like it does convey what you're trying to say, but like normal is not a good indicator of how tall somebody is. That could be really different. depending on what your frame of reference is. Also, her legs were slim and long, yet they were also not thin. It's just a terrible sentence. From a scary giant zombie, she turned into a beautiful woman. Anyway, I don't want to rip this up too much because, again, a lot of this might be due to the fact that it is translated. We don't really know much about the character's demeanor necessarily. She's in the middle of a transformation that appears to be happening in a fire. We know her gaze is energetic, but I don't really know what that means. Like, is she happy? Is she angry? Is she excited? I have no clue. We do know that her lips are bright red though, and there's a lot of red. It's a red dress, red hair, red lips, it's a bit much. It's a little Jessica Rabbit, but I tried to roll with it as best as I could. Saying her chest could barely be contained seems like this is very, very busty, but I don't know if I'm going too far with it. I don't actually have a good impression. I guess it depends more on her dress rather than her bust, but I kind of wanted to show her chest straining against her outfit since that was the description that we had. And I tried to make her gaze look energetic, though again, I don't really know what that means. The rest of her body is not really described much. All we know is that her legs are long and slim but not thin, and that she is kind of enrobed in flames, it seems like, and she was once a zombie, but we don't get a lot of. I think she's not really supposed to look like a zombie now that she's changing from her zombie body that's 5 meters tall to her normal beautiful girl body. One thing I would highly recommend when you're describing any character, not just a female character, is if you describe something like their skin or their hair in a passage, don't return to it. Just like describe her red hair once, describe her soft eggy skin one time, and then like leave it for a while before you bring it back up, because if you bring it back up within the next like couple passages, it seems almost like you made like an editing mistake. Like this seems very like fundamentally incorrect from just a reading standpoint. Like it almost feels, I caught myself like looking back up at the top to see if I had like somehow misread or skipped ahead, because it's so unusual to see like a character described in this sort of repetitive way. And I strongly recommend that when you describe characters, you don't just talk about how they look. I get that this is a big transformation scene, so maybe that's not how things were when this character first appeared in her zombie form. But I think it's really critical to engage other like parts of your senses and other physical things like stance and like facial expression and that sort of thing. We get a little of that because of the gaze was energetic descriptor, but again, that's like so incredibly vague. Like all we know is that she's not fallen asleep. Okay, so that was my next installment of r/menwritingwomen, drawn literally. Let me know if you'd like me to continue this series or if you have any ideas for future videos, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you so much to my wonderful patrons and members, including Stop Spinning, Silva Soul, West Art Channel, A Playful Fawn, Prince Piplup III, Mash In It, Forco, Honey Kitten 18, Nee Nico, Novel Goblin, Lauro, Data, Lily McFarlane, Artist James, Skitten, Gold Pikachu, Among Us Skibbity, Azri Cryptid, Glee, Hoodie Doodle, River D Goblin, Gato de Luz, Goodbye Number 4, Raz Tarosh, Becca, Kobe Octo VTuber, Graveyard Moss, Grexius, Maddie Momo, The Midwestern Menace, CB, Lucia Majiki, Live Live, Ravens Crow, Zosalot, T-Hill Music, Jabber Dabber Doo, Light Julie, Kadaria, Astral Fox Art, The Expressive Poker Face, Tsubaki, Cutie Pie, Cola, JJ Jade, and of course, Blah 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 Blah.